Welcome back to United in Action. I'm your host, Steve Chu, and I'm so happy you're here with us once again. In this episode, we're going to be continuing to explore our conversation on how Tzu Chi is partnering with various NGOs on the ground and in the air to support those who have been impacted by the war on Ukraine. Today, we're looking at two specific partnerships, Airlink and the Chameleon Disaster Service International, or CADIS. These partnerships are really instrumental in us being able to help those who have been displaced by this war and make sure that they receive the logistical support and interfaith healing that they so desperately need in this moment. Let's now watch a short video about Airlink, who's working with aviation and logistics partners around the world to transport relief workers and emergency supplies to places in desperate need impacted whether by disasters or global crises.
Hello, I'm Harrison Ford, and I want to tell you why I decided to support Airlink, an organization you've probably never heard of. Airlink is a disaster relief nonprofit that harnesses the power of aviation to save lives and rebuild communities in the aftermath of natural and man-made disasters. In the 10 years since its inception, Airlink has responded to 90 disasters, moved nearly 7,000 humanitarian aid workers, almost 3.5 million pounds of vital supplies, and partnered with over 130 nonprofits, saving them nearly $12 million by providing flights for their personnel and cargo instead of paying for air transport. Today, Airlink is helping tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, delivering over 6.5 million items of personal protective equipment and volunteer medical responders to hard-hit, fragile communities. There's nothing particularly glamorous about what Airlink does, but what they do is essential. In the aftermath of a disaster, time is a critical factor. Passenger and cargo airlines count on Airlink as a facilitator, a logistics expert that understands both NGO and airline needs. The airlines also know that by working with Airlink and its partners, there'll be minimal disruption to their core business operations, dramatically increasing the support they're able to contribute. It's important work that directly results in the delivery of food, water, shelter, expert volunteers, aid workers, as well as compassion and hope for people affected by disaster. I'm proud to be a part of the Airlink team, and I urge you to join me in supporting their work. To find out more about Airlink, please visit their website at airlinkflight.org and be sure to follow them on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Steve Smith of Airlink, who serves as the president and CEO. Steve joined Airlink in 2013, where he took the organization from a fledgling enterprise to an experienced and professional disaster logistics nonprofit that works to provide hope and aid to millions around the world. Steve, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, Steve, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
From one Steve to another, welcome to United in Action. So right. I'd love for us to start by you sharing with our audience some of the work that Airlink has been doing in response to the Ukrainian crisis.
Sure, I'd love to. And let me start, first by thanking you and the Tzu Chi Foundation for inviting me to talk here. So let's start with what Airlink does. So Airlink is a disaster response nonprofit, non-governmental organization focused on airlift and logistics. Okay. And so we ensure that transportation costs are not a barrier to nonprofits responding to disasters and humanitarian crises, as well as solving logistical challenges that are associated with moving humanitarian aid and responders around the globe. Of all of the humanitarian funding across the sector, 75% of that goes to some portion of the supply chain. So that could be the procurement and heavily into transportation and logistics. So it's really important to have it done right. There's a tremendous, the humanitarian sector is a very fragmented sector. And so, we exist also to help NGOs collaborate and be more impactful. Within 24 hours of Russia invading Ukraine on February 24th, we swiftly activated our Europe regional response plan, which really encompasses not only airlines, carriers, nonprofits, and also donors to respond to the humanitarian needs in the context of Ukraine. There were many transportation challenges that we were experiencing. And while the hostilities continue and disrupt logistics infrastructure, you really need to be able to pivot. And so within the first month of our response, we'd already transported 100 tons of humanitarian cargo, medical supplies, hospital equipment, hygiene kits, other critical supplies. But we were sending in very targeted, high priority items into support. And now we are here, nearly 4 months after the beginning of the war. We've now supported 30 relief partners, NGOs, and moved over almost 500 tons of humanitarian cargo, again, mostly medical supplies. So not only has Airlink been supporting the delivery of humanitarian cargo, but we've also provided flights for almost 400 responders to travel to Poland, Moldova, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania. Now, to give a couple of examples, one of the nurses we've moved in from Israel has now set up a clinic, worked with local organizations, has now seen over 500 refugees, children, the elderly. Another group, we sent in a team of 14 individuals from Mexico, helped set up child-friendly spaces to support and help hundreds of children. Over half of the Ukrainian refugee population are children. So that's really impactful. And then I think the last thing, a small team that we sent in of half a dozen individuals into Romania, went in, helped set up and organize a warehouse management system for a warehouse in Romania that has now subsequently opened up a major artery into providing humanitarian supplies into Ukraine. Now multiply those couple of examples by up to 400 responders that we've sent across 30 different organizations. And we're talking doctors, nurses, psychologists, fuel assessment experts, telecommunications experts, logistics specialists. What we're doing really helps those NGO partners be able to direct their spending to their programs on their ground and focus on, really helping people that need help.
Yeah, and I think you're completely right in that the stakes are so high, right? If it's not done right, the consequences isn't just delays of time, it's loss of life. And with this fragmented sector that this NGO space is, it's so important to have a convener, someone who has the trust of the community to bring people together like this. So super grateful for your work. I'd love for us to continue to explore now what this partnership with Tzu Chi and the consortium of NGOs that have come together to sign this MOU together has been like. So ADRA International, Project Hope, World Hope International. What's this MOU about? What's the work we're looking to do?
Sure. And first, I would sort of, compliment the Tzu Chi Foundation team for its passion and compassion in supporting Ukrainians. And so we've put together a consortium of 4 NGOs, Airlink being number 1 and the lead, ADRA International, Project Hope, and World Hope International. And so the idea here is that we would deliver medical aid to Ukrainians across multiple destinations, Moldova, Ukraine itself. And this will be a 3-month partnership. Airlink's role in this is really to help coordinate the transportation of these humanitarian supplies and to overcome any of the logistical barriers that NGOs always face in responding to disasters, this time even more exacerbated because it's still an active war zone. And the partners that we've mentioned will be delivering programs on the ground to local partners, local organizations. That's really important. We support the local organizations on the ground. We've also been, separately from the partnership, we've also been working on a very large shipment of food aid for Tzu Chi Foundation that will also go to help feed families in Ukraine. So that was actually picked up a couple of days ago in Taiwan and is on its way now. And we look forward to many things to come in the future.
That's so fabulous, Steve. I think you're completely right in that we're really looking for a sustained response, right? And to ensure that it's sustained, we need critical partnerships like this one. I know when I was deployed in Haiti after Hurricane Matthew to do relief work, one of the biggest challenges that we had was we have all this love globally, right? That wants to pour into this country of need, but we're being stopped at ports, we're being stopped at airports, and no one's letting material in. And to navigate that as like an individual can be so overwhelming, right? So to have this relationship, this partnership that allows us to ensure that critical aid goes to the right places and the local communities, like you emphasized, that truly need it is so important. I'd love for us to continue to explore this question of like, why is logistics important, right? Like you mentioned earlier, logistics saves lives, right? I wonder if you can continue to expand on this question of like how through this medical supplies, through working with local partners, how are we ensuring that logistics saves lives?
Sure. We see in the media, all the news right now, all of the issues around supply chain, logistics for whether we're getting our iPhones or our Androids or whatever it is delivered. Logistics in a humanitarian, in conflict situation, is even more complicated. And all of the blockers that we read about in the media are ever present in the humanitarian sector, but even worse and more exacerbated. One sobering thing that to mention is that 60% of humanitarian aid that goes in the very early days of a response to a humanitarian event, not just Ukraine, but all over, and for the last decade or so, has been either the wrong supplies or they're sent at the wrong time. And so what does that mean? That means that blocks the supply chain. We're talking about things as basic as, being able to offload these supplies onto trucks and take them to where they need to be. If you're sending the wrong things and they're getting in the way of the right things arriving, that's a really bad situation. For Ukraine itself, some of the logistical challenges, the war's far from over. I don't think we need to speculate on that. But, as things continue to intensify, many parts of Ukraine continue to be and increasingly more dangerous. We need to think about how to do things differently. And so that's NGOs working together. That's the private sector working together. The element of us bringing in the airlines, philanthropy. And so, and this is going to be needed over a long period. And so, not just through our partnership, but within our sort of long-term horizon, we're looking at probably near on 40 NGOs that we will help over the next 18 to 24 months. You're talking about 25 million people that could be displaced and require humanitarian aid. And so responding meaningfully to human suffering on a scale that is needed requires a coordinated effort.
Thanks so much, Steve. You're right in that we must work with local communities to build out this sense of resilience. I love that you are really investigating the need for a long-term horizon and a long-term plan, right? Because this war is sustained, so our effort must also continue. But we recognize that this rapid response mentality can often be detrimental to our ability to develop long-term. You mentioned earlier in your remarks that Airlink has been doing wonderful work transporting first responders to not only go there to take action, but set up the local infrastructure to ensure that there is long-term sustainability there. So I'd love to reflect with you on this final question. Where do you see this partnership with Tzu Chi going in the long term? How do we ensure we have this sense of resilience in our response to allow for a sustained response?
That's a great question and something that's tricky and challenging. I think that, Airlink and Tzu Chi have many areas of mutual interest where I think we can work together and play a key role in helping amplify responses to the humanitarian crises. The examples I gave of the individuals we sent in, the examples of the collaboration that we're putting in place, those will amplify other organizations' ability to do things on the ground and help more people. Airlink is investing a lot in our local expansion with new staff, new plans, new programs. But when you look at what's happening around the world, we're looking at now unprecedented humanitarian levels, humanitarian needs. I feel like we were saying that a couple of years ago as well, and it continues to deteriorate. Now we're on the edge of a global recession. The issues I've mentioned around the supply chain, the impact on the world of the food shortages. from Ukraine and Russia as well. And so, what we're doing together isn't just nice to do, it's absolutely critical. For Airlink specifically, logistics isn't really seen as that important until you have a problem with moving things. And there's always a problem. And so, and getting aid to people that need it quickly, it's a make or break for many programs. It's a pass fail. Either the program can happen or it cannot. I would hope that, Airlink and the Tzu Chi Foundation can collaborate on ways to sort of put in place a rapid aid and logistics solution that is sustainable over time to help support, move more quickly and support and save more lives.
That's beautiful. Thanks so much, Steve. I think we very much value this partnership with Airlink because similarly, we recognize this growing unprecedented need that is emerging within our global community, right? And at the same time, we're also recognizing that as we're doing this work, as we begin this partnership of ours, that it's not just about this moment, it's about building the trust, the resilience, and the capacity so that we can continue this partnership on and on and on to ensure that logistics continues to save lives. So I'm super grateful that you're here with us, sharing your wisdom with all of us here, and that you're doing the fabulous work that you're doing. And with that, I'd like to deeply thank you for all of your work and your expertise.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you.
Now let's watch a video introduction of our second partner of this episode, CADIS, which is a nonprofit humanitarian and development organization of the chameleons. CADIS works to provide both material and psychosocial pastoral care for those most vulnerable and at risk of being left behind. Tzu Chi first started working with CADIS in 2020 at the onset of the COVID outbreak. And when the Ukraine crisis began, Tzu Chi reached out to CADIS to learn more about its response, which then led to us signing a memorandum of understanding in June. Now let's watch this video to learn about all the things we've been doing together ever since.
The partnership between Tzu Chi and CADIS, the Chameleon Disaster Service International Foundation, started in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic when the two organizations worked hand in hand in India.
Thank you so much for considering us, listening to the real outcry of the poor sick people from India.
Tzu Chi's funding was fully utilized in India through a CADIS local agency that provided food and PPE to communities in need.
Whenever we are in need, whenever we call you people, we are there ready for any type of help. So thank you very much.
Due to the war between Russia and Ukraine, Tzu Chi and CADIS resumed working together in February 2022, this time in Poland.
These two organizations, we can know for sure, especially now after we see the work that they've done with our own eyes, we know that this is a very good place to put Tzu Chi's resources.
Patients are very different. They have own beliefs, they have own political views, and in this case of war, Poland shows that we can unite in helping our neighbor. I think it's very great.
Każda pomoc dla tych ludzi jest szalenie potrzebna i oczywiście, że będziemy współpracowali, dlatego że te pieniądze, które od Was otrzymaliśmy, pozwolą nam na pomoc tym ludziom właśnie w zakresie medycznym, psychologicznym.
On April 30, 2022, Tzu Chi and CADIS signed a memorandum of understanding. As Tzu Chi transitions to midterm relief, the partnership with CADIS will assist in providing long-term housing and psychosocial support for women and children from Ukraine and Poland.
Let's now welcome Father Aris Miranda, who's the Executive Director of CADIS. Father Aris has been working with CADIS since 2011 in both Asia and Africa to coordinate disaster responses and then also help build capacity of the local orders to help be ready for future disasters. Father Aris is inspired by his compassion for the most vulnerable and socially excluded populations, and it's what fuels him to do the great work that he does every single day. Thanks so much for joining us today, Father Aris.
Hi, Steve. Good afternoon from Rome, Italy. And thanks for having me here.
Yes. So I know Tzu Chi and CADIS have been working together, and particularly for this project, we're looking to have a joint partnership to serve over 40,000 Ukrainians in Poland. You were just in Poland visiting some of this work and also working hand in hand with our volunteers on the ground. I'd love to hear some of your reflections on the onset of the importance of this partnership and what some of the challenges and blessings of this mission have been.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would just like also to dedicate this part for all our refugees and IDPs in Ukraine. And I've been journeying with them in this past 4 months, actually. So when the crisis broke out in Ukraine, and when the refugees were arriving in Poland, CADIS has immediately mobilized an emergency response in March with the Chameleon mission in Poland and other Chameleon missions in Europe. CADIS began to get in touch also with Tzu Chi. That was sometime in March and April, whereby we organized a more systematic intervention delivering the following services that we did. First is the first reception assistance at the Warsaw Public Central Station. So we are now serving in these 2 railway stations in the central and the eastern part, wherein many refugees are arriving, coming from the border. And we delivered all sorts of assistance, not only giving them hot meals, but really following them step by step and knowing with them what do you want, where do you want to go. So it's really a personal accompaniment, with the help of our volunteers. And we were running them over 200 volunteers during that time at the onset of the influx of refugees to Warsaw. And then for those families who really need most, and especially those with small children, we offer them temporary shelters. Right now, we are having 48 families and mostly women. And then apart from also with assistance to the refugees in Poland, we are also extending our support to the internally displaced persons in Ukraine. Luckily, we found also our partners who are some of these people are our volunteers in our social mission center, and they belong also to an organization called Dobra Fabrika, or the Good Factory. It's an NGO who is also in charge of delivering goods to the different places all over the world. And so through them, we were able to deliver some help to the IDPs, especially in the cities of Odessa, Kramatorsk, which is technically Kramatorsk is one of the cities that is now being pounded by this ongoing war, in Dnipro and Lviv, where there are also most of the people who are coming from the city were being bombarded, run towards that city in Lviv, which is closer to the border of Poland. And looking at them and hearing the stories of our volunteers, obviously these are really the people who are most in need as compared to the refugees in Poland. But then, of course, our help are very limited because of the risk. It's a bit high risk to facilitate our work in that area. I myself, I was not able to enter. While I'm a Filipino, I don't have any European passport. So it takes time really to, manage to get into cross the border of Poland all the way to Ukraine. But I'm hoping that in the future, I will be able to do it. And that's really our plan. Now, these people whom we are serving here in Warsaw, we're not actually only giving them a shelter, but above all, we're giving them a home. Because in a home, we try to help them, not just only giving food, but to really let them feel that they can do autonomously whatever they want, as long as it is for the good of everybody. Luckily, we have a seminary where we used to house over 50 students way back 30 years ago, but now we don't have any more students. So we were able to offer this place for these people. And so they were able really to, to be by themselves and They cook their own meals. They're all young mothers. And if I'm not mistaken, the youngest mother that we have in the house is 21 years old. And we have a mother who arrived there. We do not know that she was pregnant. And I think she was already in her 8 months pregnancy. And then by the 9th month, she felt already the pain, the labor pains. So she could not hide that anymore. And so she told the one in charge in the house that I'm pregnant and I'm due for this month. And well, luckily, just about almost a month ago, last June, she delivered a child. And we have now a new member called Emilia. And, it gives more joy to the house then. So these are some of the things that actually we have been doing. And we want them to really be stable, autonomous, so that slowly they will be able to recover what has been lost with them. And not just only the material things, but the autonomy, the capacity to plan by themselves and for their families. And this is what we want to achieve with these families who are staying with us.
Father Aris, that was such a lovely reflection of all of the work that is unfolding with both CADIS and CADIS's partnership with Tzu Chi. I think you touched on so many beautiful points that I just want to lift up for our audience. The first being this establishment of dignity, right? That in the provision of whether it's temporary shelter, food assistance, that sense of security, all of this work isn't just for the material, but it's for that immaterial sense of stability, that sense of autonomy, and that sense of home and hope. And I love that you lifted up how important it is to cultivate community as these refugees are fleeing from conflict. So I know you briefly touched on interfaith partnerships and how much joy it's been bringing you. And I'd love for us to explore this question a little bit further, recognizing that CADIS really embodies both the Catholic social teachings and principles, while also having this chameleon spirituality of social service to the sick and suffering. And simultaneously, Tzu Chi is so in line with that, right? With these Buddhist teachings of compassion in action and to help alleviate the suffering of those in need. And I'd love for you to reflect on, in your experiences doing this work in disaster relief, where has the joy been in interfaith partnerships and why is it so important to work together?
Yeah, you're right, Steve. There's really a lot of joy in working with interfaith groups. So, this is not my first time to work with an interfaith in nature. When I started my work as a humanitarian worker, not that long ago, but way back 2009, I was assigned in Pakistan, and I worked with Muslim groups also. And then I was also given a chance to work in the border of Somalia, again, working with Muslim Somalian groups. And it's quite very enriching, actually, because, all the while, as we all know, we have a lot of stereotypes against other faiths, especially in the part of us Christians. And sometimes there are also these are some attitudes of Christians who are a bit close to other faiths. But nowadays, we cannot just simply close ourselves to others, because there's one thing that I discovered. There is so much riches or gifts, material or non-material resources in this world that is entrusted to each one of us. And all these things, they have, and I would call it, and what the Catholic Church call it, a social dimension. That is, all these gifts are meant to be shared in order to satisfy all our needs. The fact that there are people who are deprived, people who are in crisis, people who have nothing, it's because we fail to share what belongs to them. And I think this is something that interfaith partnership can help develop and again promote these thoughts, because after all, and I have no doubts, this is what we are made for. We are meant for each other, and not only for myself or for my family, but for the big family. And I think if we will be able, to touch along this line, I'm pretty sure that this world will be fully restored and justice and peace will be experienced in this world. It might sound very idealistic, but the experiences that I had and the experiences that we have right now is showing the path towards that. You could just imagine, no? These people, our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, actually, we call them guests in our house. No, we don't call them anymore refugees. No, they are our guests. Wherein all the types of hospitality, the Polish hospitality, are accorded to these people because they are our guests. But at the same time, they are not just only guests, but they are also members of our family now, because we started already sharing with one another, no? And we discovered a lot of things that we can share. And they themselves, no, they discovered also that we are not the only guests here, that we need to wait for the help or the hospitality that is being offered to us. But they realize also that I think I'm part of this house, of this home. I have also to participate. And that is why they themselves also are presenting that, can I help in doing this? Or I would like to be part of this kind of work. So this is really good. And, this is just a small experience in a small community. And of course, with this kind of little experience, if you try to share and then, grow and develop that, I think this could be really a good sign that whatever crisis in this world, we will be able to overcome. No, and then while the topic of interfaith is quite I would say it's not an easy thing actually to think of. But there's only one bottom line: whatever faith do you belong, all of them believe in one thing, and that is charity or love. I have discovered it with the Muslim. I have discovered it with the Buddhist. I have discovered it with the Hindus when I was working in India also. And this is my thought on this, that our differences will make our unity stronger and progressive. And through this, we'll be able to advance our vision of a world fully transformed, where justice and lasting peace and charity define our coexistence.
That's such a beautiful reflection, Father Aris, thinking about how our guests within this space aren't just receiving, but they're also capable of giving, to give that sense of the spirit of sharing to each and every one of us, and recognizing that we all share this common home. I'd love to, as we close out this part of our dialogue, to give you space to reflect on the Camillian and Catholic teachings of common home, and think with us about why it's so important in this challenging time when so many of us are divided and really separating from each other, polarizing, that we need to come together, bridge our differences together, and recognize that we are interdependent.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. With this kind of situations, and we're not only talking here of Ukraine, but wherever we are right now, there's so much crisis and troubles in this common home where we are. People tend to divide rather than unite, because simply we forget that we live in a common home. One of the things that when I was working way back a few years ago with the indigenous peoples in Thailand and in the Philippines, where we have many of these, they told us that, and they have a common knowledge, both Thailand and the Philippine indigenous people told me that, Father Aris, before we exist in this world, the world already precedes us. When we came to this world, we have the world already. And that is why we were born in this world, and this is our home. Now, the question is, because we know that part of our home is being destroyed. Now, how can we restore back that home? Well, it's a very complicated thing. But I think what we have been doing right now is sharing, especially to those who are in need most, the most vulnerable. But it goes beyond cultures when you share, because what you're sharing is who you are. Okay? Who you are is what you are sharing to these people. One of the realizations that I had also when I was working with the Somalian refugees way back 7 years ago, the Muslims told me that we don't appreciate so much with the things that you have given us, because after all, you are not really giving us so much as compared to the other big organizations. But what we appreciated from you is you are with us, you accompany us, you are journeying with us, and you are with us in our struggle. You never left us, even though this place is very dangerous, and yet you decided to stay with us. And this is what we appreciate most. So I think we can do a lot to restore back the good relationship in this world and to restore back the common home to its original nature by sharing what we have then. And it's also an invitation for all our listeners then, that there's so much miracle can be done in sharing. It doesn't count how much you share, but how much heart that you have when you share to these things. And this is what counts. It's more of the intention than the content.
That's beautiful. Thanks so much, Father Aris, for that clear clarion call to our listeners, our viewers, to recognize that we all have that capacity to share, that there's a miracle within waiting to journey and blossom out as we journey alongside with each other on this common home to really work to rebuild. I think sharing as a mechanism to repair relationships and thinking about how we cultivate community is such a powerful way to frame both your contribution into this space, but also the grander work that CADIS is doing worldwide. As we can see, partnerships are critical towards ensuring that the work we're doing is lasting, sustainable, and systemic. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode, and please join us next episode as we continue to explore how we can unite in action to serve the most vulnerable and those at risk of being left behind. Thanks for joining us for this episode. Bye-bye.